Hello and welcome back. Let's introduce JavaScript into the project, selecting the elements and adding event listeners to those elements. So setting up some variables, setting up a const, and this is going to be the one that we can output content, message content to the user. So using document and query selector in order to select that element, selecting the element with the class of output, and then adding it in as an object in JavaScript. There's a few other variables that we're going to need. We're going to need to get the buttons, so we can grab all of the buttons. So just do that as btns and query selector all for this one because we've got multiple buttons. So we're selecting all of the elements that have a tag of button. And then also we need to get the inputs. So let's create another element and we can call this one, maybe we can call it get values or vals using document. And this one has multiple elements as well that we need to select. So using query selector all, selecting all of the elements with the tag of input. So this gives us the ability to grab the elements, and we're going to add the event listeners afterwards. Usually I like to check to make sure that I do have the elements selected properly. And I use the console for this. So you see when I output, you see it selects the element that is related to that object. The btns should return back a node list. We've got 4 buttons. You see that all of the buttons are represented within the node list. As well, we've got get values. So this is a node list of 3. We've got 3 inputs that are contained in here. Let's add in our event listeners. So selecting our buttons, we're going to loop through all of the available elements in the node list. So doing a for each, and we can just select function. And this can just have a variable name of btn. So as we iterate through, I'll console log out btn. So you can see that we're actually going to get all of the elements that have a tag of button, and that is actually all of the buttons that are visible to the user. So we want to add an event listener to the btn. So selecting the btn object, and we're adding event listener to that btn object. And then we'll distinguish between the different buttons within the function. So this is the button action, and we'll create a function in order to handle that. So going down just below, let's create that function, button action, and we're passing in the event object. And for now, we can console log out event object. So now whenever I click one of these buttons, we get the event object output into the console. Within the button action function, where we've got the handling of the different button actions, we can check to see which one and which value actually was being invoked, where we can get the inner text from the element if we want, as well as we could use the classes, but the classes are just named btn1, 2, and 3, so they don't really provide the distinction that we need. You could also set that information into the class if you wanted to. So selecting that element, we can get that current element value, so selecting the event object and then the source element. And now when you get source element, that's returning back that element information that's triggering the event. So this is a variable within that event object where we've got the source element. So we're able to select the source element, and then we can get the inner text that's contained within that source element. So that gives us the contents of the button that's being pressed. And this means that we can check against that to make sure that we are getting that value correctly. And we're going to split this string as well, because we only need to know set, get, delete, and all. We don't need to know the rest of what's contained within that inner text. So let's do a substring of that, and we'll slice it at the index value. So we can get that value. We can call it temp. So selecting this content that we've just outputted into the console, we can use substring, which gives us a chunk of the string that we're returning. So we want to have a starting position of 0, and then what we want to return back that substring, and using index of is going to return back an index value, and this is where we're just going to have a space. So returning back index of space, and you can see when you output index of space for that value, you're going to get a number being returned there. And I'll also console log out the value of temp. So now whenever we click one of these, you can see that we're getting an index value of 3. So we're returning back all of the characters from 0 to 3, not including 3. Same thing with get, same thing with delete. So we're returning back 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and breaking at 6. So returning all of those characters back. So that gives us a shortened value that we can work with in order to detect which button has been clicked, and then we can take different actions depending on the button that was clicked. So go ahead and set that up, and coming up next we'll add in the conditions, as well as I want to set this default value for the calendar entry as 1 week from now, so I don't always have to select it. So we're going to do that as well, and that's coming up in the next lesson.